Jesus was created. That one sentence nearly split Christianity apart and pushed the Roman Empire to the edge of chaos. By the early 300s, Christianity had exploded across the Roman Empire. What started as a tiny persecuted movement hiding in homes and catacombs had become massive. Bishops led churches in major cities, Christian debates spread everywhere, and for the first time in history, the Roman government wasn't hunting Christians anymore. But peace created a new problem. Christians now had the freedom to argue publicly. And the biggest argument of them all centered around one question: who exactly was Jesus Christ? Today, most Christians hear phrases like fully God and fully man and barely think about it. But back then, in early Christianity, the language wasn't quite settled. The terms weren't fully defined. And one priest from Alexandria lit the fuse on a theological explosion. His name was Arius, and according to him, Jesus was not eternal. Arius was a priest from Alexandria, Egypt. Smart, charismatic, popular speaker. People loved listening to him because he explained theology in simple ways ordinary people could understand. And his argument sounded logical at first. Arius taught that if God the Father created the Son, then the Son could not be eternal like the Father. In other words, there was a time when the Son was not. Now, Arius wasn't saying Jesus was some ordinary man. He believed Christ was divine in a certain sense, greater than angels, greater than humanity, but still created, still beneath God. And that idea spread like wildfire across the empire. People debated it in marketplaces, churches, homes, even out in the streets. Ancient writers say that even sailors sang songs about the controversy while working on ships. Imagine that for a second, theology becoming public drama. But many Christians saw Arius' teachings as catastrophic, because if Jesus is not truly God, then can he really save humanity? That became the heart of the crisis. For early Christians, this was life or death theology. Christians believed salvation meant humanity being united to God himself. But if Jesus was merely a created being, even the greatest created being imaginable, then humanity was never truly united to God. Only God can save humanity. That's why bishops like Athanasius of Alexandria fought Arius so fiercely. To Athanasius, if Christ is not truly God, Christianity collapses from the inside. And before long, the debate became ugly. Bishops accused one another of heresy, churches divided, crowds rioted in some cities, entire regions of the empire began taking sides. This was no longer just a church problem, it became an empire problem. At the center of all of this stood one man, Constantine, one of the most important and controversial figures in Christian history. Before Constantine, Christians had faced brutal persecution under Roman emperors like Diocletian. They were imprisoned, tortured, and executed for refusing to worship Roman gods. But Constantine changed everything. After claiming to receive a vision before battle, he legalized Christianity in the Roman Empire through the Edict of Milan in 313 AD. Suddenly, Christianity went from an outlawed religion to a favored religion. But Constantine quickly realized something dangerous. A divided church could divide the empire itself. And since Christianity was now tied deeply to Roman stability, theological chaos became political chaos. So Constantine decided to do something unprecedented. He called bishops from across the Christian world together for a council, the first ecumenical council in Christian history, the Council of Nicaea. In 325 AD, bishops traveled from across the empire to the city of Nicaea, in modern-day Turkey. Some estimates say around 250 to 318 bishops attended, and many of these men carried scars from persecution. These were men who had survived great persecutions from only a few years prior. And now they sat together inside imperial halls, debating the nature of Christ. The emperor held political power, but the bishops carried spiritual authority, and the tension inside that room must have been enormous. The entire council revolved around one central question: is Jesus fully divine in the same way that the Father is divine, or is he a created being? That question eventually came down to a single Greek word: homoousios, meaning of the same substance, the same essence. The bishops defending Christ's full divinity argued that the Son was homoousios with the Father, not similar, not close, not almost divine, but rather fully divine, eternal, uncreated. This became the defining line in the sand, because Arius and his supporters preferred different wording. They believed the Son was of similar substance, but not the exact same essence as God the Father. One tiny wording difference, but massive theological consequences. Finally, the council produced one of the most important documents in Christian history, the Nicene Creed. Parts of it are still recited in churches around the world today, and its wording was direct, deliberate, and precise. The creed declared that Jesus Christ is begotten, not made, consubstantial with the Father. That phrase crushed the core of Arian theology. Jesus was not created. He was not lesser. He was not beneath God. The council affirmed Christ as eternally God. Arius' teachings were condemned as heresy, and Arius himself was exiled. And for a brief moment, it looked like the controversy was over. It wasn't. Here's the part most people never hear. Nicaea did not magically solve the crisis overnight. In fact, the decades after the council were chaotic. Arianism continued spreading across huge portions of the empire. Some emperors after Constantine even supported Arian bishops. Political alliances constantly shifted. Bishops were exiled and recalled over and over again. Even Athanasius, one of the strongest defenders of Nicaea, was exiled multiple times. At one point, it genuinely looked like the anti-Nicene side might win. There's an old phrase associated with this period: Athanasius against the world. Because at some points it truly felt like the entire world had turned against the Nicene position. And this reveals something important about church history. Theological truths were often clarified through conflict, confusion, suffering, and years of struggle, not instant agreement. What Nicaea did was clarify doctrine against a specific challenge. It did not invent Christianity out of thin air. And even today, nearly 1700 years later, the shadow of Nicaea still remains everywhere. Every time the Nicene Creed is recited in a church, and every time Christians describe Christ as true God from true God, every time debates about the Trinity emerge, the echoes of Nicaea are still there. It was a turning point that shaped how billions of people would understand God, salvation, authority, and truth itself. One council, one creed, and one question. That changed history forever. The First Council of Nicaea reminds us that ideas matter far more than most people think. Empires rise and fall, armies disappear, and political leaders fade into history. But arguments about truth can shape civilizations for thousands of years. And in 325 AD, inside a crowded room filled with scared bishops, imperial power, and theological fury, the future direction of Christianity was decided. Hey everyone, it's Zach. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you're a Christian who wants to take a deep dive into Christian history, please consider subscribing. It's completely free. Again, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.